Thank you for tuning in to Reader Radio. Tonight we join Janice Landry for Authors Chat.
Welcome everyone to Authors Chat. This is Janice Landry hosting the show, and we do have a wonderful guest, Miss Samantha LaFantasie. She is the author of Hot Song. We will be talking about that book with her, and she is on the line with us now. Basically, it's just going to be a very nice heart-to-heart conversation about the book and how she created it and what she's got coming up as well. Miss Samantha, are you there?
Yes, I am. Hello.
Wonderful. It's good to welcome you.
Thank you.
I'd like to say thank you for coming on our first show. You are our very first author, so yes, it's going to be fun. Absolutely. Now, Miss Samantha, can you tell me something about the actual book that you've written, Heart Song?
Well, Heart Song was a bit of a different avenue for me because it was actually maybe the third or fourth book I've actually written, and I was intending to write it to be published. And it was also my first NaNoWriMo experience. So it was sort of one of those fly by the seat of your pants writing ideas that just ended up turning out to be something so much more spectacular than I expected it to.
Mm-hmm. Well, it sounds interesting because you mentioned that this was one of your very first books that you just came out in September. What was it like for you published?
It was an amazing, surreal experience. It's like before when I was writing it, I was getting all teary-eyed before it, thinking, oh, my God, this is going to happen. And then when I was publishing it, I'm like, is this really happening? And it took a couple days for me to actually realize that I had just made a dream of mine come true. I just became an author.
That is cool. That is cool. I can't tell you how many people I know that struggle to try to do a book. And, it's in their minds. It just never makes it onto the page. And what you have done is
it's definitely
something
a labor
with courage.
of love.
Oh,
yeah.
Absolutely. You have to like what you do in order to create. I've never heard of anyone writing that had difficulty, that basically couldn't adore what they were doing in the process, because it's combination of both. Mm-hmm.
And I love it because it's like the more I get to know the characters, the more the story develops, and the more ideas that I get. And it's crazy because it's almost like I get sucked into that world myself, and I'm the one writing it. It's crazy. It's like I have multiple personalities going on in my head.
I understand what you're saying. One of the things I was very impressed with this book, because I have read the book, and unlike other interviewers that don't, but I have, and I was impressed by the excellent use of imagery that you've used. For instance, I have here a quote, the cool, soft cloth was placed over my eyes. I felt it tied tightly against my head, and then a cloak was placed over my shoulders. It was warm, soft, and smelled of lavender. It helped to make me feel more comfortable in my strange company. I felt a hand grab a hold of mine and help me up from the seat. The feel of the smooth skin surprised me. Its warmth soaked into mine, radiating up my arm, causing my breath to catch. Waves of unwanted emotions trickled through me, sending my heart into an erratic race. While I tried to force my heart to calm down, I felt the carriage shift. Now, I thought this was excellent use of the imagery in a storyline describing the character while the character was blindfolded, because I could physically feel you. I myself have had instances where, yes, you're blindfolded or you're in the dark and you can't see.
It's okay.
Really, you do definitely notice a difference when you are blindfolded, and I liked how that came through. Absolutely.
Oh, thank you.
Mm-hmm. Now, what really inspired you to write these books?
For Heart Song, like I said, it was more really of a spur of the moment, and it was me stepping out of my comfort zone and doing something I haven't done before. And it actually came. We were watching Beauty and the Beast the day, like the first day of November, and it was funny because I was like, God, Bella's such a pushover. And she's so, I don't know, easygoing and moves with the story. And I'm just like, I wonder what would happen if Belle was a little more jaded.
Yep,
and
I understand that sometimes the Disney characters are too wholesome. Can I ask you mentioned you were watching it with your family. What does your family think of you writing as an author? I mean, how are they involved?
Well, my daughter has decided she wants to be a writer. I think it shows on my face when I'm writing. I don't really have an office space, so I'm either got my computer hooked up to my TV in my bedroom, which is where I'm sitting at right now, or I sit in the living room and I write, or I sit at my kitchen table and I write. I'm very often around them when I'm writing, and I'm able to share that with them, and I think they see how happy it makes me, and it makes them happy, and so they're very supportive, and I'm very lucky in that.
That is wonderful, because I too find my family as a source of inspiration as well, and so I can see that you receive that as well. One thing I wanted to ask you is concerning your characters, because I found it very interesting, the storylines that you had. Now, I'm not going to reveal all the details of the story, obviously. What we're going to do is simply just come across a few points. There's a lot of stuff happening in the book. These are things... there might be a kidnapping, a funeral, and a marriage, getting married. These are all things that authors will do one or two, but they won't do all of them. And you've really tackled a lot of intense subjects. What made you, feel that this was the way for the character to go?
I don't know. It's really hard to actually pinpoint an exact decision on why. Mm-hmm. Excuse me. I basically let the characters, it sounds crazy, but I basically let the characters take me where they want to go. And all the while I'm trying to keep in mind moving the story forward, moving their story forward. And I've had, I had some people that have done beta reviews for me of Heart Song that said that there was enough stuff in that book that could have made it into 2 books easily. And,
Correct.
I think, and I can see where they say that and stuff, but for me, the story just wasn't complete until, the ending where, and I don't want to give away the ending, but... Yep,
that's right.
I just felt like it was better as a whole story, and I thought...
let me ask you this, Samantha.
These would be some of the things that might help.
I saw numerous stuff that was in your book, and there were a few things I wanted you to touch on. Like, for instance, we have a daughter, and she's a daddy's girl. And, one of the things of your character was that there is a child, a young girl, and I would love to see stuff like that come out in there. But like I said, I know that there's probably a second book involved because you had so much happening that it just seems like that seems to be the way how it may go.
Well, right now there is not another book in the plans. I've had so many people ask me about it, and just right now, for me, Maren and Rylina's story is complete.
Okay.
I may go back and I may, add in a prelude or some short story that ties in some of the loose questions that some of my readers still may have. But right now, I'm not really planning on it.
Okay.
So.
Well, no, that's good. That's fine. I mean, that's another thing I just wanted to ask you is you mentioned that you are doing some other projects. Can you tell us about them?
Yes. Well, I am currently working on finishing up a sci-fi fantasy novella. It's called Made to Forget, and it's the first of a series of novellas that I plan on writing. The number is not complete yet. This is one of those very little planning things. I have an idea how many is going to be, but I don't want to say a specific number because I'd hate for that to change.
Okay.
I hope to have that come out by the end of the summer. And
wonderful.
I have also a full-length fantasy novel that is a new adult, and it's actually editing. I'm being edited right now, and hope to have that out by the end of the year. And that's actually going to be a series. And then I'm also working on a paranormal romance. I'm sorry, that is still in the first draft. So I have a lot of stuff I'm doing.
Yep, you sound like a person with a lot on your plate, but I know that as a reader, I look forward to it, absolutely. Can I ask you, when you write, is there someone that you write for, or is it yourself? How does that process happen?
I think it's basically for me. It's just the story that I have in my mind and in my heart, and I want to put it on the paper and share it.
Well, let me ask you this. If you had to go back and do it over for Hot Song, is there any aspect of your novel or, getting it published that you would change?
Oh, gosh. It's been such a learning curve and such a new
experience
for me.
Can you expand upon that a little bit? I'm curious.
Well, I self-published my book, and I felt that really self-publishing was right for Heart Song. And there's so much I didn't know about it, and so it was kind of a learn as you go. And it's the marketing and the promoting and getting yourself out there and getting reviews on your book, and always saying, hey, I have this book, can you read it? Or, hey, check out this book, or, anything like that. It's just when you're a little bit shy and you're sticking your head out of an area that you're unfamiliar with, you're kind of a little uneasy about it and not sure exactly how to go about it. So it's just one of those things where if you fall down, you pick yourself back up, you dust yourself off, and then you go and try again. And hopefully you don't fall flat on your face, because that would be embarrassing. But,
Well, I do know that other potential writers, they have the choice, of course, to go into the publisher or else doing the self-publishing. Ways that you just can't do with self-publishing.
They do all the work. They really do. And it's not until you actually go out into the self-publishing adventure that you actually figure out how much work is actually involved in that. Because most publishers or agents, that they will do all that work for you. You just pretty much have to tell them where you want to go. And that's only if they accept your book. And of course there's a lot more in the process of that. But and me being never traditionally published yet, I really don't know how much easier it would be, but I don't know. It seems, you have to actually go out there and get the readers. You have to actually let people know that your book is out there. You have to do all the footwork, and you have to do all the effort, because you're not going to get any sales.
Now, you mentioned like footwork. What avenues have you taken that you could, recommend to an aspiring author?
That wants to self-publish? Contact all your libraries, contact all the bookstores, research all the venues that you want to use. Make sure you buy your own books and you donate them to libraries so they can be checked out and get more reviews. Do giveaways. You have to do book signings. And other things that I'm not sure I have actually had a chance yet to do or have discovered yet. I just know that you have to put yourself out there.
Now, has the social media, like Twitter, Facebook, even YouTube, has that helped?
Yes. I have actually a friend of mine. She put my book trailer together off of some stock photos that I found on DeviantArt, and found some reused music, which is a key. You always have to find those shortcuts. You have to find the free stuff, because that tremendously cuts down on your costs. And I've had some people buy my book just based off the book trailer, because she did such a good job on it. She had that right mood and right setting inside that book trailer. And Twitter, I am still a little bit of a newbie on, even though I've had my Twitter for probably about as long as I've had my Facebook. I just don't do it very much, and I have my Facebook and my Twitter linked, so whenever I post on Facebook, it automatically goes to Twitter, so I think I'm kind of lazy in that. But I've had a few people talk to me about my book or come and participate in some of my giveaways from Twitter just because I've posted it on Facebook and it was linked to it. Facebook is probably the most helpful for me because most of the authors that I've networked with are on Facebook and have bought my book and have reviewed my book and have shared my book. And so I think that it's definitely one of those things that is a must to have.
The people that read romance novels, at one point it just used to be quote-unquote Harlequin romances. It used to be the single mother or the married mother, but she was at home. She read the books while, her kids were in school. That has changed.
Right.
Twilight has helped it a lot in the sense that it's a romance novel about werewolves and vampires, and men and women are reading it, and same way, for a lot of the other books that are out there. How has this helped you in getting your book out?
I really don't know if I have an answer to that because I haven't really relied on any of the other books or genres. I kind of just took my story as it is as a standalone by itself and gave it a genre and put it out there. And basically, it's been attracting readers, but I don't know if I would compare it to anything like that. I'm not sure that Twilight, the invent of Twilight, has had any bearing on my ability to be able to get my book out there.
Well, I know for a fact that more men are picking up these books. They want to know what is happening in the storylines. They get involved just like us women do. And, I'm sure you've heard of, Team Jacob and, so forth. I mean, the guys are getting involved in it. They truly are.
Right.
And this means that they're not afraid to pick up, a romance fantasy anymore. And it just opened up the world. I mean, when you open up, half the population, you get a lot more readers. And I do have a lot of guy readers. Mm-hmm.
I do have a lot of guy readers. I do have a few that have read my book and have reviewed it or have just sent me a personal note on how much they've liked it. So that is pretty touching. It is pretty neat. Actually, think about I wanted to get a book and pass it on to the kid that walks past my house every single morning when he goes to school. He always has his nose stuck in a book, and one of them was actually Cassandra Clare's books, one of those. And I was floored because I was like, wow, he's reading all the time, and these are like thick books.
That's true. I did want to ask you just some typical questions, if I could, as an example. Mm-hmm. When you were, like, say, 5 or 10 years old, between that age, I mean, did the writer bug, hit you at that point, or was it later?
Later.
Really?
Strictly speaking, for me to in the sense of me becoming an author, it was later in life. I was always exposed to stories, but it wasn't until I was getting married, and I did a little bit of dabbling in the writing and stuff, but it wasn't until I was living in Idaho with my family, and I just decided to sit down and write because I wanted to. And it was just something that grabbed a hold of me and held on to me, and I didn't really want to think about becoming an author really seriously until my mom gave me a story that I had wrote on an actual typewriter when I was, I want to say, 12. I was really young, and it was one of those old-fashioned typewriters that she was using when she was going to college, and it was an adaptation of Aladdin that I sat down and wrote with my brother, and she had kept it all these years, and she gave it to me, and I was like, wow, I could really do this. It was silly, and it's silly, but it's one of those things where it's just like, it started out doing it because it made me feel good. It made me have this release from reality for just a little bit, for however long I can write throughout the day, and that was great.
Mm-hmm. Now, can I ask you, going back to Heart Song, the main characters, excuse me, I'm sorry, I have a tickle in my throat. The main characters, Marin and Rihanna, I did want to just ask you concerning that, because I noticed like some of the developments in the characters, as an example, you have your leading lady, she knows how to do swords. I think that's great. In the sense that, how did that come about, that thought?
Well, Verlina has a little bit of a troubled past. And you find out a little bit later in Heart Song when she's actually starting to open herself up to Marin and be willing to let him get close to her, or her him. And you discover just how much of a wound Dance had given her by betraying her in the marketplace in the beginning of the book. And it was because of that part of her life she had to protect herself. And it was because of Dance, who helped her to learn the skillful art of swordsmanship.
I think that's wonderful. I think one aspect that will definitely attract our readers is the character of Marin. How he appears in different aspects of the books, he evokes feeling and emotion that most men can easily relate to, because they themselves may be feeling this. Because when you're in a relationship, sometimes you're not sure what to say, right, and you do make mistakes. In you know what I mean, like I said, you sometimes feel, I don't know what to do or say, you know what I mean, to convince her that I love you.
Right. Well, and then, there was that, Marin's hands were sort of tied behind his back at most of the story, and it was pretty much really out of his control. He only had so many things that he could do, that he was allowed to do, and it was because it was a tricky and delicate situation between him and Verlina, especially after they cross over.
Now, can I ask you to describe what you feel is Heart Song?
Heart Song is pretty much, it's like Soulmates, but it's so much stronger. It's more like the most intense love that you can ever feel, and that you literally would die without them. Like, if they were not in your life, you would not be living. I wanted something that was like that was a strong, powerful, unbreakable bond, but give it a new meaning. And I knew there was just like so many, I've read so many stories where there was like soulmates and stuff and wolves and all this other stuff, but I wanted to bring my own little twist to it, and so Heart Song came to be, and I tried to invoke that feeling and invoke that meaning throughout the story and through their relationship. No matter how much Verlina hated Marin in the beginning, she was meant for him, and there was nothing she could do about that. And it was because, of the Heart Song.
Well, I like how, she kind of protested and didn't want to admit that she was, or had confusion with it. And I like how, as you let things happen with the story, it would later all fall in place.
Right.
Now, can I ask you, have you ever had someone in your life that felt like that? Because you explained it so well. I'm assuming that, yes, you have.
He's in the other room.
Oh, okay.
My husband. Oh, he rescued me in so many ways. I owe everything to him. He is definitely my Heart Song. Definitely.
You sound like a very lucky lady to have someone that is such support and comfort to you in your life, truly.
Yes, and then there's times where I wanted to shoot him.
Well, we're all not perfect, but he's close. He's close.
It's definitely akin to Verlina and Marin. Let's just put it that way.
Now, my next question was simply, did you, is any of your characters similar to someone you know?
Yeah. I think I put a little bit of Verlina in me. I think I put a little bit of all my heroines, a little bit of me in all my heroines. I mean, like I used to do Shania sticks with my husband before we got married, and that's kind of like I want to say they're Japanese bamboo style sticks that are practiced for sword fighting, and the whole headstrong, strong-willed, definitely me. Marin's love and devotion, huh?
No, I have to admit I enjoyed Relena's character. I was very happy that she was not a weak-willed person, that she was strong and could take care of herself. I think that applies to a lot of modern ladies out there now.
Right. Well, she was kind of forced into that situation, though. She was forced into having to learn how to take care of herself, and she was forced into having to be strong and rely on herself because, like I said, of the things that happened to her before the story actually started. But, yeah. Marin's love and devotion is part of my husband. I think we all have those best friends that want to be a little bit more. I don't know if very many people have picked up on that, and I don't know if I'm giving too much away, but Dance really wanted to be with Relena, and so there's a whole other history between those two that get sort of touched on in that story, but not a lot. And I kind of just wanted to hint at it. I didn't really want to make it point blank. But I think we all have, at some point in time, a best friend that wants a little bit more from us than what we are willing to give. And I'm not sure about Jiren. He's a different character all on his own.
Mm-hmm. Now, I did want to ask you, because I liked the way how you created a whole entire other world, okay, that would be able to accept your characters when they are there, but your characters were always yearning to go back to our current world. And I like that aspect.
Mm-hmm.
Can I ask you how you got that idea?
I think it just evolved on its own. Sounds really weird, I know, but it just sort of evolved on its own. I needed a place that nobody can see them, nobody can find them and reach them. And I had always done, like, minor research with, like the different realms of existence and things like that, and I wanted something that was similar to that, but smaller and more localized than just one, and have it be because it was a necessity to survive. And so the Immortal Realm was born.
Wonderful. I did want to ask you, if your book was made into a movie, who do you picture playing each character part?
Oh, okay. Confession time. I had a hard time coming up with a really good face in my mind for Marin. And so I went online and did a search, and inside my book is Cherokee, the Cherokee language, and of course there's Gaelic language. But it's more of it is more like I wanted that Native American feel because I'm part Native American. And so I wanted to give some of that of me into a story and feed it. And so I came up with Jay Tarviari, I think is how you pronounce his name. But he's a Native American actor. And so he definitely has to play Marin. And he's really the only one that I've picked out that would have to be a must. Everyone else, I'm pretty much open to suggestions. I wanted to leave everything pretty much up to the reader's imagination.
I did want to mention, I just wanted to read a small excerpt, but basically I was just so impressed by how very realistically written you had a lot of areas of your book. I mean, I could see it in my head, and it was like it was written for a motion picture. For instance, as an example, I heard him swing his sword with my back turned. I swerved out of the way, twisting to counter his blow that was coming immediately after. His swings were stronger, forcing me back a little more each time until I was up against the wall. He disarmed me with a flick of his wrist, then tossed his sword and pressed up against me, holding my arms in place. He kissed me hard and then said, I'm not the only one that didn't anticipate. Before I could say anything, he pulled away and walked to a sword, using his foot to pick it up. He slid the toe of his boot under the blade, just after the hilt, and ejected the sword into the air. I ran to mine, sliding to the floor on the side of my leg, and gripped the sword as I passed. I twisted myself up and braced for his attack, struggling to deter this attack, and certainly couldn't get any of my own. And our swords became locked at the hilt. Now, I could see that in a movie. I truly could. And I could hear the clink of the swords. Very realistic. Very realistic.
Well, I have
something that you just have to have as a talent.
Right. Well, it probably helps that I see these scenes play out in my head, and over and over again, the exact scene. And each time I'm paying attention to more and more detail, and the sounds, and then the smells, and then what else is happening, and putting that into words, and until I have that whole scene complete. And so it kind of does run like a movie in my mind. So I think that might help.
That's really cool. That really is. One thing I wanted to know is I like how you described how important the heart song is. That, basically that you two belong together. That, like I said, if one died, the other one would not be able to live further. And
right.
That's the sign of a true love, something that just doesn't dissipate. Very, very focused.
Right.
And I just loved how you brought that all together. Truly.
Thank you. Thank you.
Oh, my pleasure. And I did want to just ask you a question or two, if I could. How long did it take you to write the book?
2 years. 2 years from start to finish.
2 years.
2
well,
years,
it definitely
yeah.
shows. Definitely shows.
Oh, thank you.
This
I
is
hear
not,
some people who spend 5 years on their books, and I'm just like, oh, God, that's a long time.
That's true. That's true. Now, let me ask you this. I mean, while you were writing, what was happening to your life during that time period?
Wow. Well, we had just moved into a duplex, and the other side was empty. And something that not everybody knows or understands is that my daughter is disabled, and she has what's called gray matter heterotopia, and it's caused her to have behaviors, and she doesn't understand or comprehend anything like you and I do. And she also has a little bit of autism. And so there are days where it's worse, and there are days where it's better. But we had a day sleeper, move in next door to us, and so during this time I'm trying to write this story. I'm trying to maintain a calm home, and it ended up not working out. He complained, and we had to move, but we found a house, and we bought a house, so all this started happening, and then over this past summer, my husband had hurt his back at work. And so that put a little bit of a damper in our plans, and so he's been out of work on a back injury. But yeah, it's pretty chaotic life.
Absolutely. One of the reasons why I ask is I always thought one of the most enchanting stories that I've ever heard of was from J.K. Rowling. When she was writing her very first Potter book, she worked as a bus driver. And the in-between time when she wasn't dropping off the kids, that's when she was, or picking them up, she was writing. That's how Harry Potter became.
Yeah.
And now she's,
that.
of course, the world's richest woman. One of the
I thought about that, too. I thought, well, man, if your success in the book is dependent upon your trials while you're writing it, I should be pretty good.
Well, you know what it is if you've got a good story and you can relay it well, it's all going to work out for the better, for the right, I think.
Yeah. I have to say that I am so floored and beside myself whenever I get a new review or get a new comment from someone who's read my book. My own dad bought my book, and I was floored, and he bought the paper version and wants me to sign it so he can say, I know this author, and I'm just like, it's so cool to feel all the support and to see Heart Song so well received and to have people love it so much. There was like only one review that I thought I was going to have that was going to be negative, and it ended up being a great review, and I was just that floored me even more. I'm so shocked on how well it's been received.
Well,
so
I don't think you have anything to worry if you have the talent, and it's obvious you do, Miss Samantha. I see only the best for you. That's why I look encouragingly for whatever more you're going to put out there in the years to come, truly.
Oh, thank you.
Absolutely.
That's so great.
Mm-hmm. Now, I did want to ask you, you seem to have been open to a wide variety of influences when you were writing the book with all the different topics that you've covered and experiences. How does this all come about? Have you ever experienced any of the experiences in your books?
Yes and no. I have had some pretty negative experiences in relationships before my husband, and that kind of played into it because I was sort of already familiar with that sort of heartache and that let down and how to pick myself back up from that. And so I did put that experience in there. I've never had a kid kidnapped. Mm-hmm. The one time the closest I ever got to that was when my mother-in-law and I were at Walmart and we were picking up pictures, and she was in the beginning part where the toys and stuff were, the vending machines and stuff, and I guess she turned around and my daughter disappeared. And this is when she's like 2 years old. Yeah. She came up to me and she's like, I can't find your daughter. And I'm like, what? And so they found her. She was playing with one of the other toys that was on the other side of the wall that my mother-in-law couldn't see. But that was pretty much the closest. And I think that is the closest I ever want to get. Oh, wait, no, that's not the closest. My son, my youngest son. He's a monster. He decided he wanted to learn how to crawl out of his window when he got in trouble. And so I'm sitting here and I'm working on Heart Song, and I'm trying to put on some final touches on it. And he gets sent to his room. And so my husband's, grilling some stuff for supper, and I don't remember what it was, but then he comes in and he's like going to get Nathaniel that's my son, to talk to him about what he did to get in trouble. And he's not in his room. He's not in his closet. He comes out and he's like, where's Nathan at? And I'm like, what do you mean where's Nathan at? He was in the room. So we went outside and started looking for him because the window was open and the screen was open, and we couldn't find him. And we called the cops, and we were like really frantically looking for him, talking to our neighbors, seeing if they saw anything. And by the time the police officer showed up to my house, my son poked his head up from the back seat of my car. And usually we keep our car locked. And so he's like looking up going, what's going on? And I'm like, oh, dear God, there's my son.
Yeah. Oh,
and I can laugh about it now because it was one of those moments where you're sitting there and you're going, is this really happening? This is not really happening. Where's my son at? He's not here.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
So that was actually the closest. And I don't want to get any closer than that because I can't imagine what that kind of loss would be like. And I think I sort of channeled the emotions of what it could have been for her.
Yeah, I believe myself, the loss of a child is heart-wrenching, truly. And I believe that you did hit upon it very well in your book. And I felt it myself when I read it, truly.
Oh, absolutely. I want to say I'm really glad, but that feels kind of sadistic a little bit. So I'm going to say I'm glad that you were able to feel the emotion, but I'm sorry that it affected you, I guess.
Oh, I have read books out there that physically made me cry, and and my husband would come into the room, and poor David would say, what's wrong? You hurt or something? He says, no, I'm just having a good cry, and he doesn't understand that. I guess men just don't.
Right. I actually, the funeral scene that you were talking about, I cried when I wrote that. I really cried. And then I started to read it. I belonged to the Kansas Writers Association, and we were bringing in our stuff to read scenes from. and I read that scene, and it was really hard not to cry in front of everybody, because I cried when I wrote it, I cried when I read it to my husband, I cried every time I read it, and it was really hard not to cry at that point in time.
Now, you mentioned the 3 projects that you were working on. How do you feel about each one? Because it seems like you're being pulled apart 3 different ways. And are you able to keep it all in line?
They are very, very different stories. They're similar in a sense, in the sense that all my stories are going to have some level of a love story in it. It's not going to be as intense in every single one. And I'm doing that purposely because I don't want, not every relationship is going to be as intense as like Heart Song was. And so with Made to Forget, which is the novella that I hope to have out by the end of the summer, my protagonist had woke up in a hospital without any of her memory. And what she finds out as the story progresses is that she was involved with a secret ops mission, and it caused her to have an accident, and in the process she lost her memory. And so it's very different, and it's very surreal. It's set 450 years in the future, and it's set in the metropolis. It's set in Wichita, which I've made into a metropolis. And
maybe one day Wichita will
very
be.
Different. It's well on its way, isn't it?
Well, I always call it the Sea of Corn, because everywhere that you drive surrounding Wichita is another field of corn, and they just keep on mowing down the fields and building more stuff.
Yeah. I actually live in Derby, and there is believe it or not, a very small field of corn right in the middle of it. And it's like over by Walmart and that farming store that I can't remember the name of. But it's funny because it's right there, and you drive by it if you go to like the gas station, or not the gas station, but like to Walmart or the pet store that's over by there, or wherever you're going, and you drive down that street, you're always going to see the cornfields. And so it's weird and bizarre just to have a field right there. And it's like right next to the residential district too. It's like out of the blue, but yeah, we're everywhere you go. There's a field, and it's bound to have corn or something in it.
That's the Midwest for you, absolutely.
Yeah.
I did want to ask you, what do you think influenced your writing? Was it an author, a person, an event?
I think a number of things maybe have contributed to my love of writing. My dad was a storyteller. He was one of the greatest storytellers I've ever known. He would read us, or he wouldn't even read us a story. At some point, he stopped reading us, and he was making them up, and me and my brother would fall asleep to him telling us stories of adventure, like Mickey Mouse and things like that. But he would twist it all the time and make it to where it's some grand new adventure. And it's one of my earliest memories of my dad and my brother and me, and that kind of close bond that we had. And and I think at some point I didn't want to read stories anymore, and I was casually reading like R.L. Stine in high school and junior high, and it wasn't until a friend came up, and she had this book in her hands, and it was really big, and there was something about the picture on the front of it that intrigued me, and I was like, what are you reading? And she said, oh, this is Dragonlance. And I said, really? And she finished reading it, and she said, yeah, do you want to read it? I finished it. And I'm like, really? And it's like at the end of the school year. And she's like, yeah, you can borrow it over the summer and give it to me when we come back next year. And I was like, great, okay, sure, I'll read it. And so I read it, and I read it, and I read it, and I could not get enough of it. And I think that really started me, because then I started writing more poetry, and then I wrote that story, and at some point, I think I was 12 anyway. I said I was 12, but I don't remember. And then from there, I just, life got in the way, and so I didn't get to write as much as I wanted to. But I think just a number of things contributed to it.
Mm-hmm. Can I ask you, why did you choose Heart Song as the title? You could have picked anything.
I couldn't come up with anything else.
Okay.
I struggled. It was like a placeholder title. And one of the things that I told a client of mine, because I do copy editing also, and he was talking to me about character name changes and things like that. And one of the things I told him was that to do it earlier in the story is a lot easier to do it than to do it later in the story, because once you're later in the story, you're pretty much attached to it. And to change the name makes you have to go back and relearn the story and feel really close to it. I think it kind of like separates you and changes it in a way that makes you have to relearn everything. And so Heartsong, I just cannot come up with a different title. I know people were like saying, that's not really a good title for your book. And I'm like, I know. And, you know, when I decided that it was going to stick as Heartsong, nobody else had a book named Heartsong. And so I was like, it's the only one out there. It'll be pretty cool, you know, to have the only book named that. And then after I publish it, like 5 more get published. And so it just probably wasn't the best title, I would admit that. But I really could not come up with another title that really fit the story as much as I wanted it to. It just seemed to fit it better.
Okay. Can I ask you, I mean, because every time you do a final draft, you know, there's always something that you wish you'd kept or that you should have taken out. How was that concerning Heartsong?
I struggled a little bit with the beginning part because I was considering making Relina. I have toyed with it in rewrites, having Relina actually be in the Sires and having Marin rescue her from there, and going through some of the torture that she would have to endure in being involved in the Sires. And so that would probably be one of the things that I probably would love to have kept in there, just to add a little bit more of that intense emotion and that struggle for Relina, and a little more for Marin, I guess. But I think about it, and I tried as I might, I could not get it to stick, and I could not get it to work. So I think, as it is, Heartsong's pretty much a complete story.
Mm-hmm. Well, as you were mentioning, you don't see plans for a part 2, and so I have to agree with you. Mm-hmm. And one nice thing that I think that would be really great to it, though, I can see you having, in essence, sequels concerning other characters.
I haven't really thought about that, to tell you the truth. I have heard of it being done.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But I haven't thought about doing that myself.
Well, in particular, I was thinking Nala.
Yes.
I thought that would be a fantastic start for a second book. For the simple reason, there's so much to her character that we don't know yet.
Yeah. It's a thought. Mm-hmm. Definitely a thought.
When we left her, you know, she was brand new, you know, recently born, but she had, you know, followed her heart, and it's kind of curious what avenues that following would have taken. And that's all I would look for more, basically.
Right. It's definitely a thought-provoking idea, for sure. Mm-hmm. This might be something that I might actually look into, if anything, for fun. But, well, yeah.
Now, I did want to ask you, just simply for fun, you as the author, if you could have dinner with one person, dead or alive, who would it be and why?
Let me think about that. There's so many people that I would love to have.
All right, then how many would you have, and who?
Cleopatra, for one. Cleopatra is my idol. For
cool.
obvious reasons. I mean, just the strength that she had in her overall story, portrayed in history, and her fall. She would definitely be. Yes. We'll just call it that, yeah. To be able to sit down with her and have a talk with her and get her personal side of it, that would be awesome. That would be beyond awesome. It would be like the chance of a lifetime. And then alive, definitely Celine Dion. She is my idol.
Oh.
Her music has got me through some pretty rough roads in my past, and whenever I was down, I would always be able to put her music on, and she would help me.
Yeah, she does have a beautiful voice. Truly, truly.
I would love to see her.
Well, let me ask you a question. When was the point in your life that you realized that being an author was no longer going to be just a dream, but this is going to be an actual career that you were going to turn into reality and be a success?
When my husband told me to.
So I think he believed in you before everyone else.
He did. We started writing a story together when we lived in Colorado, and it was like right before we got married. We were talking about writing a story together, and it didn't turn out. We kind of like sort of started typing it out, and then we got sidetracked, seriously sidetracked, and he went into the military, and we got married and had an adventure of our own. And so, but we kept it all those years, and then when I said I was going to sit down and start writing again, he's like, yeah, go for it. And then I kind of like put it off again. And it wasn't until I was writing a story that I'm never going to publish called Sanctuary.
Oh, why not? Why not?
You know what? I've heard that it's a curse, so to speak. There's this thing where, like, your first novel that you ever write will never be published because it's never going to be good enough, and it's because it's just the first novel. It's you getting your fingers wet or your feet wet or getting the exercise of writing a novel down. And I, looking back on it, it's just a really horrible idea. But it was like a modern adaptation of Adam and Eve, and it with like a huge major twist, and it was just kind of like overkill almost by the end of the story. And so I had just completely lost interest in it, and I tried to have a friend of mine help me edit it and go through it and figure out the flaws and where I was falling on it. So it was supposed to be a romance, and she's like, yeah, you might want to rethink this story. And I'm like, yeah, maybe after I'm done writing the other 50 that are going on in my head.
You know, it's funny you say that because there have been some famous authors that once they pass, their relatives find this or that in a drawer, you know, and try to publish it, and you think, oh, that must have been why they didn't want to put it out.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, they always say the first one will never get published because it is crap. It is like unavoidable crap. It will not be able to bloom into anything pretty or worthwhile reading.
What do you think makes a good story? What are your things that you have to have?
I think there has to be an emotional connection to the characters, first and foremost. If you can't connect to the characters immediately, or at least pretty quickly, then it really doesn't matter what happens in the story because you're not going to care about what happens to those characters. And for me, that's, you know, one of my biggest things is I have to be able to relate to these characters for me to be able to even write them. I have to have their story. I have to care about their story. I have to know the ins and their outs. And so that has to be like the number one thing. And then maybe the plot or the story where, you know, what are they achieving? What is their goal? And then just how the story plays out and try to see how their life takes them. This, you know, as long as I'm interested in their characters, I'm interested in what they're doing. And I think that pretty much is it.
I think so. Now, let me ask you this. What is the most amusing thing that's ever happened to you while you write?
Apparently I have arguments with my characters.
Oh, okay.
My husband is...
They're that real to you. That's wonderful.
They are that real to me. I will admit that. They are that real to me because, my husband pointed out to me the other day, I was having a conversation with one of my protagonists, and I was like, no, you have to do this. Would you stop? And Philip comes up to me, he's like, honey, do you realize you're arguing with your own characters? It was funny.
Now, do you ever experience writer's block? I mean, John Lennon went through years of that.
Yes. And our KWA president doesn't believe in writer's block, and if he's listening to this, he's probably going to be saying, no, there's no such thing as writer's block. But for me, there is. And I think...
Well, how do you get out of it?
For me, well, a little bit about what writer's block is for me is I get so creatively stumped. I have too many options, or I have not enough options, or I'm trying to get from point A to point B, and in the middle is blank, and I have no idea how to get there. So generally, I ask my husband his idea. I ask a fellow writer friend of mine who does a lot of my beta reading her opinion, and sometimes I have a critique group. Then if I still lost and I still want more opinions, especially if her and my husband are separate, they're on opposite sides of the spectrum, I'll contact my critique group and get their idea and maybe put out a shout-out on Facebook and see what their idea is, and then I go from there. And usually by the time that happens, I already have an idea of where I want the story to go, regardless of what their opinion is or what their ideas are. It comes to me in the process of that, and that helps a lot. And, if there's an idea that they come up with that I never thought about and I would like to use that, I tend to use that too and throw that in. And that's sometimes how I get out of it. Mm-hmm. Other times I just have to break away and get a break.
Well, writing is such a personal experience. I mean, you're sharing your thoughts and your stories. How does it feel going on a show like this and talking about something that was basically in your head? I mean, is it uncomfortable for you? How would you explain that?
I think the only way that I would be uncomfortable is if I was in person and in front of cameras, because I was excited. I wasn't even nervous about coming on here and talking about Heartsong. I was pretty excited about it, actually, and anxious to do it because I was so floored that you guys asked me to be on your show. And not only just be on your show, but be the first author on your show. I thought that was pretty spectacular.
Well, we are happy to have you, absolutely. In fact, you've been a wonderful guest, and I want to continue this conversation. Absolutely. Can I ask you, now the writing that you've endeavored with, I mean, because you're telling me you've got Heartsong and other projects, has it been worth it? What would you have done to change the experience?
I'm not entirely sure. I'm not really one of those people that go back and say, well, if I had a chance to do it over again, I would do this differently. Because everything that I've done has led me to this point, and I can't see how making a different decision would lead me to the same point. It's sort of like Pandora's box in a way, I guess. I'd rather not open it.
Well, I did want to ask you about the fame aspect, because, like in the 1800s when there was no television or movies, books were, the authors that wrote the books, they were the stars. Mark Twain, Samuel Clemens, Louisa May Alcott, they were stars in their own right. That is changing it's happening now. I mean, you've seen what type of press, as an example, Stephen King can hold, or John Grisham. You are in a field where that can happen to you. How do you feel that you will handle fame?
I would hope that if I were to get as well known as Stephen King, which would be awesome, I would hope that I would be able to handle myself in a dignified manner. And especially considering, with fame there comes there comes a certain level of people trying to dig up a bunch of trash about your life, and I would hope that I would be able to face those instances with some level of dignity and a level head, and be able to be pretty calm and cool about it all.
I was reading about one author in particular, and it's interesting that when you're in the field of literature, when you write that book will last, okay, for as long as your life and longer. I mean, your book could still be around, let's say, 100 years from now, okay? And people will be reading it and feeling the emotions that you're enacting in your book and saying, wow, what a read. You know what I mean? This person was really something. Because that's how I feel when I read, you know, like say, Louisa May Alcott, Hawthorne, Emerson, you know, that the emotions that they put forth on paper then, you know, resonate. And I believe that your book is one of those types of books that it's still going to resonate the same feeling.
Thank you.
It's not going to go away.
Oh, thank you. That is really awesome to think about, because it's a very powerful idea, and it's a very powerful thought to think that when I'm long and gone, somebody's going to hold a piece of me, and they're going to be in love with it. And that's the idea that keeps me going, I think, is one of the ideas that keep me going, is the idea that I'm going to fade away, but my work isn't, hopefully.
Mm-hmm. Well, I do think that, you know, literature, as far as I'm concerned, is a field where you hit upon, you know, something that resonates with a person is going to stay out there. And you bring up topics that people just have not thought before that, you know, I mean, in your heart, because you're talking about serious relationships, common problems that people go through, misunderstandings, you know, I mean, anger, fighting, you know, I mean, all because of miscommunication, and that happens in daily living today, okay? Yeah. And your book touches upon this, and that's what riveted it to me, because, hey, I've been there, you know? I feel this, you know, if I've had a fight with my loved one, you know, I mean, and run out and slam the door because I didn't want to say more than, even though I was feeling it, I didn't say, you dirty, you know what, you know.
Right.
I held it in, but nonetheless, you know, I mean, I was still mad, you know, and all you can do is, you know, you understand that, and that's what I was, because you hit upon an emotion right on the nose, and I thought that was wonderful concerning Heart Song. That's why I believe it falls in amongst those categories of those type of authors, for the simple reason you touched a chord. That chord is so good.
Great. Mm-hmm. Well, that is so great. I am so glad. Thank you so much.
I did want to ask you an interesting question, because you were mentioning that you're going to be writing science fiction, a whole different genre.
Yeah. It is a very different genre, and it's you know, I haven't really, and this touches back on the question that you asked me earlier about how I keep them straight. I think it's easier said than done, and in an aspect, but then in the same sense, it's one of those things where if I put my mind to it, I can accomplish anything, and that's pretty much how I've proved to myself is I have like a science fiction, which is a very different genre than fantasy. They're similar, but they're very different. I mean, the Nefarium novella, it's such in a class of its own. It's so separate from Heart Song that it is a whole frame of mind change. I have to switch the gears a little bit. And then it's the same thing with the paranormal romance that I'm writing. It's a whole other switch of gears because it's completely separate from either the Heart Song or the Nefarium series. So, yeah.
Well,
very different.
One thing I wanted to ask you, because I was looking over some of the works of Stephen King, and he's written books on how to become an author. And one of the things that he encourages authors nowadays is to read, because when you read, you see how the other person is doing it. It helps you with your own writing. What I wanted to ask you is, now this is just a funny question, but what literary character would be the least appealing to be with, stuck within an elevator for half an hour? Now, I can already tell you mine. Jar Jar Binks. And I think everybody will agree with me on that. You would not want to be stuck in the elevator with him. And I would
do not agree. I do not agree. I love Jar Jar.
But I just want to ask, what is yours?
That I would not want to be stuck in an elevator with?
Correct.
Probably the same person I would love to be stuck in an elevator with. Rachel Magere. Definitely.
Can you explain why?
Rachel Magere is the twin brother of Carmen Magere, and they are two of the main characters in the Dragonlance series, and particularly speaking, the first 3 books. We have an offset series that are a part of the Dragonlance series too, and it's because he's so dark and moody, but it's at the same time that's what's so intriguing about him. He is my favorite literary character of all time, and it's because I think when Tracy, I'm sorry, I just messed up the name. Tracy Hicks and Margaret Weis and Tracy Hickman got together to make these characters. I think they purposely made him to such a degree because he for like most of the story he borderlines on neutral, and you're not sure if he's going to be good or evil. And then when he finally makes the jump into evil, you're like still rooting for him, and he's still intriguing, and you're still wanting to know more about him. But you're kind of like, dude, what is wrong with you? But then in the same, you just, it's one of those literary pieces of perfection, I want to say. And I'm hardly an expert or by any means, and that is just purely my opinion. But I think he is definitely the character I would not want to be stuck in an elevator with. But if I was stuck in an elevator with him, I would think I would be happy about it too.
But I mean, I was like I said, I was just thinking of some really good questions to ask you. But in all honesty, we all have a personality that, you know, there's another personality out there that we don't get along with. And I was wondering, would you consider writing about someone that you did not like?
You know what's funny is on Facebook almost every day, and like I said, I network with the most amount of writers on Facebook than I do anywhere else, and they have these pictures that say, warning, or beware of the writer, or be careful of what you do, such and such, you know, like you may be written into the story, and the author may kill you. And honestly, I have not put anybody I have not gotten along with as a character in any of my books. I don't see how that is karmically beneficial to me.
I can understand that. You know, because I was just thinking about, on Saturday Night Live, they have a famous sketch. It's called Cheeseburger, Cheeseburger. Okay, and apparently the SNL artists that were working on the very first season, they would go to this wonderful little place to get a hamburger, and that's what they would say. The people in there didn't speak much English, but they just kept on saying, cheeseburger, cheeseburger, and they eventually wrote it into a script that's a classic now with John Belushi in it. And I was just wondering, what experiences have you had that you've included in your book?
Inside Heart Song?
Yes. Or that you plan to add to another book, perhaps?
You know, I can't really think of anything off the top of my head. Trying to think. I can't really think of anything.
No, that's okay. Well, let me ask you this. What's the best part about being an author, and what's the worst?
The best part about being an author is being able to legitimately escape reality and to have conversations with your characters and still claim to be perfectly sane, even though it may not look like it. The bad thing is never being satisfied, I think. I'm always going to have this story that I have to get out of me, and it's a lot like bloodletting in a way, where no matter how much I give, I'm still going to want to give more. And I think that's one of the downfalls, but in the same sense, it's also a benefit, I think, for me. I think the warning sign of when it's time to hang up the pen and let the computer go collect dust is if I don't have that desire to sit down and write, or I have no idea what to write.
Well, let me ask, now, was there any alternate endings to Heartsong that you even considered?
No. The thing about Heartsong is I definitely had the ending in mind. It was perfectly clear from the beginning. The beginning was also, like, the first paragraph in Heartsong is the beginning that I had in mind. And the last half a page of the last chapter is exactly what I had in mind. I never thought about changing it because, to me, it just didn't, the story didn't need it. It needed to end that way.